Good afternoon, good evening. Where are we? Somewhere in between. How are we all doing? We're live now. So do drop a message in the chat to let me know you're here. So if you hit the subscribe, you'll be able to chat. You might need to refresh after that. So if you subscribe, you can always unsubscribe at the end if you really want to. No problem. Good afternoon, Krish. How are we doing? Are we all good? Hello, hello. Got Dayan modding for us. Martha, good afternoon, evening. Huda, fantastic. I'm good, thank you. I've had a good day. So I think we've got a little bit of lag at the moment. We'll see if that irons itself out just once we're up and running. How are we all doing? So Chona, I'll do my best, obviously, with names. Kikalomo, great stuff. Have we had a good day? I assume we're kind of near the end of our summer holidays at this point. So how have we found it? Are we ready to go back to school? We ease ourselves in with a little bit of maths on a Monday evening. I'm just going to adjust one of my lights as my green screen is being a bit of a funny one there. See if that helps. Okay. Okie dokie. Good evening. Oh, we've got a few more. There we go. Fantastic. Katya, good evening to you too. How are we all doing? Just going to adjust that as well. Let's see. There we go. We'll see if that sorts it. Awesome stuff. Hello, hello. We'll get started in a minute. I know there might be a few who have been on the science lesson, biology. Did any of you jump on the biology one with Laura, I think it was, wasn't it? Has anyone come from biology, given that a go? How did we find that? Hello, Neil does crying over AQA. That's quite the unique name we've got going on there. So there we go. I'm good, thank you. It's been a good day. It's been a good day. Lol. Dale in, how are we doing? All right. Okay, so what we'll do, I'm going to get started in a couple of minutes. I will introduce myself, right? So give you a little bit of a background as to who I am, and then we will obviously do some maths because that's what we are here for. Okay. All right. So before we get started, if you do know anyone who might be interested in or you think would find this helpful, do drop them a message now so you can copy the link across, send them over. Obviously, this one is freely accessible to them. So they could kind of jump in, see if it's good for them. And obviously we could build ourselves a little community. It's really nice once we all know who we can start to recognize people and we know the same names each week. So it's really nice to see those people. Okay. So do drop them a message if you can, if you've got the chance, and then we will get cracking now. All right. So send that link across, and the more the merrier. And we'll do a bit of maths on a Monday evening. All right. So a little bit of background about me. My name is Guy. So some people just think it's like some guy doing maths, right? So there's random guy does maths. My name is actually Guy. That's why it's Guy Does Maths. I've been teaching for about 12 years now. It's been a long road. Learned a lot along the way. I have a first class degree in economics from the University of Bath. So economics, those of you who are kind of obviously finishing off year 11 this year, you might then think, what's economics got to do with maths? You might be looking at A-level maths possibly as an option when you finished year 11. That might be something that you're thinking about. So there is quite a lot of maths in economics. It's not unusual. I take fantastic. You might do GCSE economics, absolutely. So some of you might do GCSE. That's just as good. So if you eventually go on to do A-level economics, maybe a degree, it is highly mathematical. Okay, really mathematical university level economics. So I ended up then becoming a maths teacher at the end of it. All right. So alongside that, I've also been marking A-level exam papers for maths for around 10 years or so. So the idea then is that I've picked up along the way lots of things that students do that they sometimes kind of make little mistakes on. So it's then little bits of knowledge I can pass on to you. That's the idea. Okay. All right then. So might as well do some maths now that we're here. So I will ask questions along the way. So feel free to pop your answers in the chat. Okay, so if you think you've got an idea, if not, obviously, and you're kind of concentrating on writing your stuff down, that's no problem. But do have a go at answering questions. It helps. If I spot any things that we've made a little mistake along the way, I can try and correct those and fix them and tell you maybe what you've slightly misunderstood, just like you would in any normal maths lesson. Okay, so here we go. We are going to look at today a higher topic. Okay, so this is specifically a higher topic called completing the square. So some of you might have met this before, some of you might not. It might be something that you're going to do in year 11. We'll wait and see. But we are going to look at that, and I think we can get to a pretty good place by the end of our lesson today, where we can complete the square confidently, and we know exactly what we're doing. Hi, Yashi. And then the idea is that by the end, we'll be able to have a good go at the sort of exam-style questions we might see, but it's all to do with quadratics and a technique that we use there. Okay, so some of us might have seen completing the square before, some of us might not. Doesn't matter. We'll ask questions along the way. All right. So we're going to start by doing a bit of expanding. So that's a bit of practice as well. So we're going to try expanding some brackets. So we've got this x plus 3 squared. So I'm going to do a little reminder for this. Okay, so we'll do for our first couple, we'll remind ourselves how it works. So I'm expanding my double bracket. Okay, so I can write it out twice if it helps. And I then need to go through my FOIL, right, if that's the method, or grid method, if that's your preference, right, whichever you would normally do. The idea then is that it's just a little practice and reminder that we're going to use to help us with our completing the square as we work our way through. Okay, so as I multiply this out, then I would do my first terms. So I can see a few of you have already kind of spotted. Yeah, fantastic. We already know how to expand it. Awesome job. So we've got Waki, Yashi, Kikalomo, and Neil does crying over AQA before he disappears has given us that. So we've got x squared when I multiply those, and then I'd have x times 3, which would give me a plus 3x. I've got a 3 times x, which would give me another 3x. And I've got a 3 times 3, which gives me a 9. Okay, if I simplify those middle terms, I get x squared plus 6x plus 9. Okay, so there we go. That's our starting point, right? Nice, easy start. So what difference would it make if I then just had this plus 1 tagged on the end? What would we need to change about that answer to part A, the one we've already expanded, if we had this plus 1 added on the end? Is anything else going to change about our answer there, or is it going to be just 9 becomes 10, right? So that's it, because the bracket would be the same. We'd just have to add on one more onto this bracket here. So now it would be x squared plus 6x. That would stay the same. And then instead, fantastic, well done, Georgie, we'd have plus 10 on the end instead of plus 9. Easy, right? We can do that. That's fine. So this time, I'm going to give you guys a second to have a go at working this one out. So you need to expand your bracket first, right? So you can write that out if you need to. If you don't need to, that's fine. Depends on how good you feel you are at expanding brackets. Okay. So x plus 5 squared, we want to expand. And then we do have a minus 2 as well, tagged on the end. So have a go. What's it going to end up as? If we have our full expansion, we've got 3 terms. There's going to be an x squared, an x, and a number on the end. What will we get when we get there? So now's your chance, Wacky, right, to get all your answers in. All right, so this is a chance. There were a lot of people on the summer school, so it's a little bit of a smaller group today. Okay. So what's it going to be? Have a go. I know it's a bit awkward to type in the chat when you're trying to do powers, but a few people you might have spotted have had a go. So there we go. Yeah, we've got some possible solutions with a bit of working out there. Fantastic. Yeah, we've got some final answers. So if I expanded just the x plus 5 squared, I'd get x squared plus 10x plus 25 if I just did that. But, as lots of you have spotted, great job, we've got a minus 2 as well. So then that means that 25 that's on the end wouldn't be a 25 anymore. We'd make it a 23. Nice. Good stuff, Martha. Well done. Yeah, God's power. So you're kind of, Adiyamo, kind of focusing on that 23 on the end. Fine. We had lots of other ones. Football HQ Network. That's a bit of a mouthful. Yeah, good stuff. And Nasheed's for yous as well. Awesome. Right. So does much change, right, for this last one if I just make it an A instead? Can I still do it if I just change that number to an A? Does it now become kind of really difficult and now we can't do it? Or would we say, actually, that's fine, you know, no problem? What do we think? So we're trying to put in the questions, say put in, yeah, so we're going to have a look, yeah, so we'll see how the questions are worded shortly. and how that's going to work. So we'll put those together. There we go. Yeah, so we've got a few people. So if I look at those first 2 bits, that's our kind of starting point. So we'd have an x times an x would be an x squared, and then we'd have x times a twice, wouldn't we, right? So all these times we've had like plus 3x plus 3x plus 5x plus 5x. Now we'd have plus ax plus ax. So we'd have plus 2ax. And then I'd have an a times a or an a squared tagged on the end. Awesome stuff, right? We're off to a good start. Great job, everyone. So my question to you is then, can you spot how these coefficients, the x coefficients, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll highlight it so we know what we're talking about. So these coefficients, so all of these ones, how they are related to the bracket over here. Okay, so what's the relationship? If I said all those bits I've highlighted in yellow, is there a kind of quick, easy way to look how they're related to the numbers or what's inside the bracket? Okay, because we had one without a number, didn't we? We had an A. So how is it related to that thing inside the bracket? Okay, can we spot the connection? So we've got a couple who think, yeah, so there we go. So Yashi spotted it, fantastic. Ogboninum, that's an interesting one there. Times by 2, Martha, times by 2, fantastic. Okay. So completing the square is basically doing this backwards. Inside the bracket is half. Yeah, exactly. That's the way round we're going to look at it, Georgie. So that's a good way to think about it. So we could say the yellow bit's double what's in the bracket, or the bracket is half of what's highlighted in yellow, right? It's the same thing, either way around. So what we're going to do is have a look at how we go backwards and start with the thing that's got x squared plus 10x plus 23 or whatever it might be, and put it back into these brackets here, right? So we're going to go the other way around. That's what we're going to try and do. Okay? So here's our first one. So we're starting with x squared plus 6x, and we're going to write it in this form, which we might call completed square form sometimes. Okay? So our job is to think, okay, what needs to go inside this square bracket here? Okay, so inside this square bracket to then make it work with x squared plus 6x. And then this is where that little pattern we spotted between the two, where we spotted that pattern, this is where that's going to be helpful. Okay, so what was the pattern we said? If my number is 6x, what's going to go inside that bracket? Okay, so in here, if I've got 6x up here, what needs to go inside my bracket? What's it going to be? Let's see how many we can get. Okay, so we've got a couple who've spotted already. I think the issue I've spotted with my green screen is the sun is blazing right through my window behind, and it's making that a much lighter green. So when the sun disappears, it all fixes itself. But when the sun comes out, it's kind of doing that. So I'm going to have to think about how can I fix that. Right, there we go. We've got loads of people now flying in with our right answer. Fantastic. What a Martha. T4M Roblox, I guess that is, I suppose. Nice one. Ogboninan, yeah, great stuff. Chiruno, brilliant. Godspower Diamo, great. So it's going to be x plus 3. Now, the problem is, okay, so try and be a little bit more clear about what we mean by I don't understand. Because if you just say I don't understand, I don't know what we need to fix, right? Because here, if you kind of explain a little bit more clearly which bit you're not sure about, then I'll try and explain it a little bit more clearly or show you an example. But if we just write I don't understand, then I'm not sure which bit we're talking about, okay? So it's just helpful if you can be a little bit more specific. So I halve the 6x, so that's going to be a 3. So I put x plus 3 inside the bracket. But the problem is, if you go back to these ones we expanded, remember we always got a number as well, didn't we? So we had like a plus 9 or a plus 10, or we had the plus 25 when we expanded the bracket. So here, if I expanded that bracket, I'd get an x squared, I'd get a 6x, but I'd also get a plus 9 as well, wouldn't I? Right? I'd get plus 9. Now I don't want a plus 9, because if I go back to what I had up here, there was no plus 9, right? So what we're going to do is take away the 9 that we would get. Okay? So now, if I expanded that, so if we did what we did before, I'd have x squared plus 6x plus 9, and then this minus 9 would then get rid of it. So my thing would then be x squared plus 6x, which is what I wanted it to be. Okay? So that minus 9 is really important because it gets rid of the 9 that would come when we expanded the bracket. Okay? So, Wacky, yeah, you're absolutely right. So whatever's in the bracket, you square it and add a negative sign. That's true, right? As long as you then remember to include any other numbers that were there, right? So we're going to have a look at that now and see how this one now works, right? So it's the same idea. So I'm going to focus on just this bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm kind of going to ignore the plus 2. So this plus 2, I'm going to kind of pretend for a minute it's not there, all right? So I'm just going to forget that. Let's just worry about this x squared minus 4x. What would I need to put inside that bracket with the squared on it to get the x squared minus 4x? Just that bit. Forget about the plus 2, right? We'll worry about that in a minute. What would need to go inside my bracket to make it work? So try and be a bit more specific, Martha, because it would be a 2, but remember, it's not just a 2. What else is it that's inside that bracket? What's the whole thing? Okay, so I'm going to need a 2, but what else? Because now we want to make sure we're filling in the whole bracket. There we go. So now we're getting the idea. So Kikaloma, yeah, x minus 2. So careful, Nasheed, you've included an extra x. So you've got an x minus 2x. I would just want an x, as lots of us have got. Martha's got now, yeah. Now we've written it out. So this is why it's helpful. So Ogboninen, you've got x plus 2. And what I really want is x minus 2. Okay? So that, if I expanded this, this would be x squared minus 2x and another minus 2x, so minus 4x. But I would also get minus 2 times minus 2, or plus 4. Okay? That's what I'd get if I expanded that. Now, this is where we need to fix it, right? Because we don't want that plus 4. So what we're going to do is take it away. So we take away the plus 4, right? So when I get rid of that now and I put this minus 4 on the end, they disappear. Okay? So I've got rid of the 4 that would have come out of expanding those brackets because I don't want that. And now I bring back the 2. So now I want the 2. The 2 is important, right? That was there. So now I bring back this 2 and I put that on the end. So I stick that plus 2 on the end. And then I can put that minus 4 and plus 2 together to make x minus 2 squared. Minus 4 plus 2 would be minus 2. That is the answer that I was looking for. Okay? So when I want to express x squared minus 4x plus 2 in the form x plus p squared plus q, my answer would be x minus 2 squared, and then I'd end up with a minus 2 outside. So at this point, we're going to have, you'll see from your workbook, right, if you've had a look, if you managed to print that out and get that ready, we're going to do lots of practice of this, okay? So don't worry if you've got bits of it and you're like, oh, I'm not quite sure how the minus 2's happened, but I'm happy with the x minus 2 squared, right? We're going to get lots more practice to try and get the idea, okay? So nice boy, what I've done is I have expanded this x minus 2 squared here. So what I've done, I've taken, so this bit here, I've expanded that to get just that bit there. So the green bit matches up. That's what I've done. The minus 4, that's the interesting bit. Because remember, we didn't want to get the 4. The 4 that happened was because we put minus 2 there, and you would have to do minus 2 times minus 2. That gets you plus 4, and we didn't want the plus 4. So we did minus 4 to get rid of it. Right? It's like a little trick. So we do the minus 4 to get rid of that minus 2 times minus 2 that we get, and then we add on the 2 that we did have. Right? As I said, you'll get some chance to practice it and see how it works and a few more. Okay? But this is the idea of what we're trying to do without completing the square, because it's really useful, right? It helps you to solve equations and all sorts. All right? So, where the minus 9. So it's the same thing, right? The minus 9. I'm putting the minus 9 there to get rid of the plus 9 that comes from expanding the bracket, right? So I'm putting the minus 9 there. It's me. I'm doing it to get rid of that plus 9. So because it's a plus 9, I just stick a minus 9 after it. If it was a plus 5, I'd put a minus 5. If it was a plus 20, I'd put a minus 20. Whatever it is, I'm just going to put a minus to get rid of it. Okay? So that's why we had a plus 4, and then I just made it a minus 4. All right? So I do plus 4, minus 4, get rid of it, and then this time I had a 2 that I wanted to add on. Right? So the negative that we add on the end basically gets rid of the positive number that's tagged on the end. That's the idea. Okay, so we're going to try a few more, right? So you'll get the idea. All right? So nice boy, we're going to try a couple more. You'll see how it works, right? As I said, if you've got bits of it and you've kind of got what's going in the bracket, I promise you it'll start to kind of click as you try a few more. So this is our first one, x squared plus 14x plus 10. So we are going to ignore or kind of focus on the x squared plus 14x. That's the bit we're focusing on, right? Forget about the plus 10 for now. What would need to go inside that bracket? One thing at a time, right? What would need to go inside that bracket with the squared on? Make sure we put all of it this time, so we know if we've got the signs right and everything. Okay, yeah, that's it. So Martha, you're starting to get the hang of it. Yeah, well done, Yashi. So this time, Kikolomo, remember, this time it's a plus 14x. So it would be a plus 7. Roblox, I'm just going to go for Roblox. That's a bit easier. Yeah, you've got it. Fantastic. Lots of us, yeah. So we can see the idea. X plus 7. Well done, Nashis. Yeah, good stuff. So x plus 7. First bit, done. Right, so we tick that off. Great job. Right, we've done that. That's the first main job. We've got the hang of that now. So this is the bit that I know some of us are then finding a bit tricky. If I expanded that, I'm not going to write it out this time, I'm going to think about it in my head. If I expanded this x plus 7 squared, I'd get an x squared. I'd get a 14x. Great, I wanted that. I would also get 49, right? I'd get 49 as well. Now, I don't want 49. So what would I need to put first outside this bracket here if I don't actually want the 49? What am I going to do? If I don't want it, what's the first thing I'm going to write outside that bracket after I've written x plus 7 squared if I don't want that 49? Brilliant. Yeah, we've got the idea. Yeah, does it start to make sense now? So I put minus 49. That's that done. And then some of you have done it already, I know, right? So this is what I mean. If you've got it and you're already doing the plus 10 as well, great. That means you're already way ahead. But if you're looking at that and saying, right, now I also then have to bring back the plus 10, right? Because remember, I focused on x squared plus 14x first, did that, x plus 7 squared minus 49, and then I put the plus 10 on. Now I can put it together to make my final answer, which would be x plus 7 squared minus 39. Fantastic. Good job. Nice work. I told you, this is it, right? I know sometimes this happens with maths. You kind of think, I've got bits of it, but I'm not quite sure. You try a couple more, you go, yeah, great, I've got it now. Awesome job. Well done. Right, so loads of us have done a great job there. We've understood the minus 49. Fantastic. And then we put the plus 10 on. That gets us the minus 39. Awesome stuff. So this one's a little bit trickier, right? It's the same idea. Okay, exactly the same idea. But now we've got a slight problem we're about to run into. What's going to go inside this bracket? So inside this bracket, same rule still applies, right? So x squared minus 9x plus 20. Remember, this is the one we're doing up here. Actually, I'll write it out so it's next to it so we can kind of highlight all the stuff we want. You can have a think about what you want to put inside that bracket while I'm doing it. So x squared minus 9x plus 20. This bit here, this x squared minus 9x, I'm going to put in what's going inside. Ooh, so we've got a couple of answers here we might have a think about. So we've got some correct ones. I think we had one or two who aren't sure. So what was our rule? What was the rule we followed? We've all changed the rule because we didn't like what happened when we followed it. Okay, so we had 14x and we halved it to make 7. So now we're all kind of changing the rule because we don't like what we're going to get when we do it. You're absolutely right. Okay, so some of us are putting some question marks or we're not sure. I need to halve 9. Okay, so lots of us seem to, I think we're probably square rooting it because we're looking at it thinking, oh yeah, because of that squared, I'm going to square root it. Remember, that wasn't the rule, right? Can't change the rule just because we don't like the answer. We've got to follow the rule. We've got to halve it. So it's going to be x minus. Now, 4.5 is right, but I'm going to prefer to write a fraction because it's a bit easier for the next bit. Okay? If you want to use a calculator, you can. So if you've got a calculator handy and you want to use that, that's absolutely fine. But it is easy to do without a calculator if you use a fraction. Okay, so if we stick with the fraction. So that bit would get us, so this x minus 9 over 2 or 4.5 would get x squared minus 9x. Now, if I expanded that, I get the x squared, I get the minus 9x. I'd get something else as well. This time, same rule applies. This is why you might want to use a calculator if you're not sure, but we can do the same thing. I now need to put something outside the bracket. Okay? Now let's think where that came from. Okay? Before, we had 7, and we ended up doing minus 49. Okay? That was because 7 squared was 49, so we did minus 49. So the challenge now is what is 9 over 2 squared? So this is why I've written it as a fraction, because fractions are easy to square because you can just square the top and you can just square the bottom. Whereas if you have a decimal, that's much harder, isn't it? Right? It's harder to do. If I have 4.5 and I go, what's 4.5 squared? That's quite difficult. But if I say, what's 9 squared? I'm pretty sure you could all answer that. If I said, what's 2 squared? I'm very confident we could all answer that. So then we can make our fraction, which some of us are starting to spot. Okay? So good job, Yashi. Well done, Agbaha. So 2 over 9, you flipped it, Martha. We're not going to flip it. We're going to square it, right? So you've flipped your fraction to 2 over 9. We're going to square it. So I square the 9 and I square the 2. So it's minus 81 over 4. Okay? That wasn't that bad. Now this is at the harder end, right? You put fractions there, suddenly we're making it difficult. All right? But the same thing still applies. So that is the x squared minus 9x. That bit's done. But, like we had to do before, I still have this plus 20, right? I can't forget about the plus 20. So I have to make sure I include that as well. Okay? So, if I now put that together, I've got my x minus 9 over 2 squared, and I've got minus 81 over 4 plus 20. That's just a bit of fraction work, right? So again, at the moment, you might use a calculator to help. Later on, you might say, I can do that, arithmetically or by hand or in my head. But plus 20 would be plus 80 over 4. It would end up as minus a quarter. So that followed the same rules. I know everyone, you probably feel it's a bit trickier. Okay? Probably feel like, oh, that was difficult because it had a fraction in it, but it's still the same rules. We haven't changed the rules. We just had a fraction for it. That's all. It's the only difference. Okay? Minus a quarter. That's from putting the minus, that's working out minus 81 over 4 plus 20. That's minus a quarter. Okay? So we work that out. We put the two numbers together to work out what we should get when we do that. All right? Okay. So we don't change the rules if we put algebra in it as well. So if it says AX, 2AX here, we don't change the rules. So I'm going to follow the same rules. So plus 2AX plus 1. Same rules. So what needs to go inside my bracket with the squared on it to get the x squared plus 2ax? Right, follow the same rules. The rule has not changed, right? That rule we used for the page before, the rule we've used for part A with the x squared plus 14x, the rule we used for x squared minus 9x is still the same rule. So what needs to go inside that bracket to make it work? Okay, just follow the same thing. We've done the same thing every time. Start to see some people here in with some good answers. There we go. So remember, Nashiz, I don't need. Oh, you've just missed the brackets out, right? Fine, yeah. You guys can see you kind of in, doing it as a squared as well, right? So Why? Oh, we've got a few who've decided to put half, right? So you're looking at the wrong, you've looked at this number on the end, haven't you? Right? If you're putting a half, remember, it's not that number, it's the one that's in front of the X. So again, it's this one here. That's the one we're interested in. So we can see a few of us have spotted if I put an X plus A. So I've halved 2A because that would just be A, wouldn't it? Right? So X plus A squared. So now I follow the same rules, okay? Where I have X squared would be done. I'd have plus AX plus another AX. And then I'd get an A squared on the end. All right? So if I get that A squared, I need to do minus A squared and then bring back the plus 1. So that would be my final answer. So what I'm going to do, I know those ones we found a little bit tricky because they had the fractions and they've had the algebra in. So I'm going to add one more question, right? I'm going to add an extra one that's going to be a little bit simpler, back to kind of more like the first one for you to have a go at to see if you've got the more basic ones sorted, right? Because that's where we want to be kind of right now. So if I said, let's do the same thing, but we're going to do it for x squared. Let's go for plus 12x, and let's go for plus 15, right? So same thing. So we're going to do the same thing. So it's a bonus question, right? I'm going to add an extra question on. So same thing, but this time I'm just going to ask you to have a go at it. So I'm not going to go through step by step. I'm going to see if you can work out what you're going to end up with when you've finished, right? So you can go through the same stages yourself. So you can say, what's the bracket that I need, right? So you can go through and say, what would I need to put inside my bracket? Once you've filled that in, you can think, right, what do I need to take away from my bracket after I've filled that in, right? And then once you've done that, what do I then need to add on the end that I had in my original question? And then once you've done that, you can simplify it and put it together. Okay? So we go through the same process, but now there's no fractions, there's no algebraic terms, so it's a little bit simpler. So we'll see if we can get there. Right? And if you can crack this, that's where we want to be right now, right? To jump straight into do all the algebraic ones is a tough job. If you can get to the point where you can confidently do these ones, right, with the numbers, when there's no fractions and everything, that's awesome, right? We've done that in what, half an hour or so. So that's amazing. Okay, so we can start to see some answers dripping in yet. So I look at the x squared plus 12x. So I've got to put an x plus 6 in my bracket. Awesome. That would then get me a 6 times 6 or 36. So I get rid of that. And then I need to remember that I had this plus 15 on the end. So I put that on. And then I'm going to have my x plus 6 squared minus 21. That is amazing, right? Look how many correct answers we've got already, right? Well done. Yashi, nice boy. Fantastic. You've got it, right? So remember, nice boy, you found it a little bit tricky to start with. And now we're knocking these out, no problem. Agbahar, awesome. Dalen, fantastic. Yeah. Taylor's version, fantastic. Football HQ Network, Martha, yeah, you've kind of got the full one. So you've got the fifth. So just careful, Martha, you've put the plus 15 and the minus 21. So it'd be minus 36 and then plus the 15, and that gets you minus 21. So just be careful about that. But that's good. Nashees for you. Yeah, great job. Right. So remember, if you can do those ones, you're doing really, really well. That's awesome. Okay. So what we're going to do now is have a look. So we're going to practice this a bit more, but look at kind of how you might be able to use it to answer other questions, right? So now we're going to solve a quadratic. Now you can solve this particular one by factorizing. I know that, right? So before you start going, oh, I wouldn't complete the square for this, I could factorize it. I know you could factorize it. I wrote one that specifically was able to be factorized. But we're going to use completing the square to solve it, to see how it works, so we have like some nice answers. Okay, so that's going to make it a little bit easier than have nice answers. All right. So same thing. And again, it's back to a nice simple one, so this bit should be okay. So first, we're going to do what we've just been doing. So we're going to try and write this into the square bracket with the number outside. Right, so I'm going to hand that over to you guys because we're all smashing it at the moment. So what's going to end up once I've done x squared plus 10x plus 16, if I write that in my bracket with the squared, what is it going to end up as? Okay, so again, you can go through the same process, so you can think through what it's going to be. So go through the bracket, what's going to be inside the bracket. Once you've done that, you can do what's outside the bracket, and you kind of add on the number that we had to start with, then you simplify it, and we get down to our full expression that we're trying to have. Okay? So there we go. We've got a few kind of starting to come in. So I've got x squared, x squared, look, that was very good. X plus 5 from our x squared plus 10x. So we put x plus 5 inside our bracket. That gets me minus 25 is what I need. So now if I then remember, I've got the plus 16 as well. Just need to check then what minus 25 plus 16 is going to get me. Because I don't know if we've got a few that maybe have just got to check our arithmetic. So I've got minus 25 plus 16. If I simplify that, gets me minus 9. Okay, awesome stuff. Well done, Michael. Good stuff. Martha, well done. Yeah, football, HQ, yeah, it's going to be a 9. Fantastic. Well done. Agbahar, good stuff. So I've now got my completed square expression. Nice one, Roblox. As I say, I'm just going for Roblox. It's easier, right? If I just go for Roblox. So now we're going to use that to solve the equation that we started with, right? So now if you remember, what we started with was way back up the top here, was the thing that we've just rewritten, but it also had the equals 0. That's the extra bit it had. So we're going to put the equals 0 back. So x plus 5 squared minus 9 equals 0. So we're just adding on the equals 0 because that was what was in the question originally. Now this is a different question now. This is your solving equations or rearranging equations. So can we rearrange equations successfully, right? So it's a step by step. Okay, so we go through step by step. So what's the first bit we might rearrange? Now don't expand the bracket. That's normally there's at least one person who's thinking, oh, I'm going to expand the bracket. That's a good idea. We've just rewritten it without the expanded bracket, so we don't want to do that. We want to start trying to rearrange it so that, remember, our answer ends up being x equals. That's the aim, right? And we have to fill in all this stuff in between. So what are we going to do? So we're going to, first of all, plus 9, right? So we go one step at a time. So first of all, we're going to plus 9. So now it says x plus 5 squared equals 9, right? So that's our first step. What's our next step in solving our equation? So we added the 9. Now it says x plus 5 squared equals 9. So what would I do now to get a bit closer to having x equals? That's where I'm trying to get to, remember? I want to get to x equals. So what would we need to do to get there? We've got a couple, yeah, starting to spot what we might do. Okay. So if I've got x plus 5 and I've squared it, I now want it to be just x plus 5. So what must I have done to get there? I must have got rid of that squared, which I would do by square rooting. So I'm square rooting 9. Okay? Now, square root of 9 is a nice number, it turns out. So that's all right. So if I square root it, I'm going to get 3. And then what's the bit I need to remember? If I've square rooted a number, there's a really important bit I might need to remember. I can have more than one answer when I square root a number, can't I? Okay? So I can have plus or minus, right? I know you've got this, Yashi. Don't worry. I can see you doing it, Yashi. I'm trying to help out the people who are finding it a little bit more tricky. So we've got plus or minus 3, because remember, plus 3 times plus 3 would be 9, and minus 3 times minus 3 would also be 9. All right? And then I now take away 5. So I've got two different answers. This is the key bit, right? Because I can now write them separately. Because I can either, to that minus 5, add 3 on, or I can take 3 off. And both of those are answers, right? So this is where you might remember if I factorized it, originally, instead of doing this, I'd have had two brackets and I'd get two answers. So now I can do the same thing here where I do x equals minus 5 plus 3 or x equals minus 5 minus 3. And I try and do both, right? And I give two answers. So we can now see some people have started to spot what some of these answers might be. So one of them is going to be minus 2, right? So x equals minus 2 is one of our answers because minus 5 plus 3 is minus 2. And then my other answer is minus 5 minus 3. So a little bit of arithmetic with my negatives. So my 5 became negative, right? Good question. So here, remember, I'm solving an equation. So if I want to take that plus 5 and move it over here, remember I have to do the opposite. So I need to make it a minus 5. So then when I move it across, it becomes a minus 5, right? And while we've been doing that, we can see lots of us are now saying, yeah, minus 8 would be our other answer. So there are our two answers, okay? So your problem with what you said, so nice boy, what you've said there is if you expanded the bracket, remember, if you expanded x plus 5 squared, you'd get x squared and you'd get 25, but remember, you'd also get plus 10x as well. So then you'd end up back with x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 9, and then you can't really solve that yet because you can't do the square rooting and all that sort of stuff, right? So that's the problem you've got if you try to do that, all right? Okay, so that's how we can use completing the square to go through and solve it. All right. So same idea. These ones we can't solve with factorizing. So when we solve these ones, we're going to get square root signs in our answers. But that's okay, right? You might remember doing surds and things like that, right? You might not have done, but you might remember doing surds. But we can give it a go. But the key bit, if you can just do that, completing the square bit first, remember that is awesome, right? What we're looking at now is using it, but if you can complete the square, that's a really big takeaway from what we've done so far, right? So we're just going to think about that. So job number 1 is to write this, x squared plus 2x minus 5, in the completed square form with its square bracket and the number added outside, or the number taken away outside, depending on what we get to. Okay, so have a go at doing that first, right? So what's that going to be? Forget the equals 0. We can pretend that's not there for a minute. So I've got x squared plus 2x minus 5. Remember, we go through what goes inside the bracket. That's the first thing. Once we've done that, what do we then need to take away straight away, right? So once you've filled in what's inside, what do I immediately take away from that bracket? And then what's the other number that I then have to kind of add on the end or take away on the end that I had originally that we sort of ignored, right? So it's going through those same steps each time. What does it need to be? Okay, so you can go through and work that through. So I'm going to start kind of filling in some bits. Okay, I know some of you have spotted it because I think Rev, you're kind of talking about what's going to be on the outside, right? Because that's where it's going to end up. So that's good. So you've kind of worked out what that will be. So there we go. Yeah, some of us are starting to now get complete answers. I know it takes a second or two to kind of fill it in. So x plus 1. There you go. So if you got that, you can tick that bit off and say, yeah, I got that bit right. So I got the x plus 1 squared. That was correct. I would then need, straight away, minus 1. Because remember, 1 squared is 1. So I need to take that away straight away. Okay? Then I need to remember the minus 5 as well and stick that on the end. Then I can put it together to get my completed square of x plus 1 squared minus 6. All right? So are we good with that? I'm going to kind of just check in. Remember, this is the main part, right? So if you can then do the solving as well, that's great. That's even better. But, you know, you might not have done some maths for a while. Might be a bit rusty. So if you've now managed to get completing the square, that's fantastic, right? That's amazing, right? Really, really good. So x plus 1 squared minus 6, we've got. That's sorted. So now we'll have a go, you know, because we might as well have another go at what we were doing before. So now I'm going to say x plus 1 squared minus 6 equals 0. Equals 0, right? So I'm tagging on the equals 0 now so that I can try and solve my equation. All right? So step 1. That's it, Martha. Have a bit of confidence, right? Without the question mark. Have a go, yeah? Without the confidence. That's it. We're going to plus 6. So now it's going to say x plus 1, still squared at the moment, because we haven't done that yet, but equals 6. We've one step along, right? We've done one extra thing. All right, good start. So this is where we're not going to get a nice number. So remember, you can write it with the square root sign, right? So we've got the squared on the bracket that we don't want. So we need to get rid of it. But this time we don't have a nice number. So when we had 9 before, it worked quite nicely because we could just square root 9. But now we've got 6, and there isn't a nice square root of 6. So what we're going to write is x plus 1 equals square root of 6, right? So I'm going to write the square root sign. So I'm not going to, you could put it on I know you could put it on a calculator and say, oh yeah, but root 6 is about 2 point whatever it is. But we're going to leave it as root 6, okay? And then I need to remember to put my plus or minus in because I've got 2 options. And then Taylor's version, bing, you've got it, yeah, and then minus 1. So this time, my answer is minus 1 when we move that across, as Taylor's version said, plus or minus root 6. And that's 2 answers, and you can write them out separately and say that one answer is minus 1 plus root 6, or minus 1 minus root 6. And those are my 2 answers. Now remember, this is tricky, right? This is the stuff that would be nearer the end. If you were actually going to solve equations using this, that's much nearer the end of the paper. Whereas if you're just doing the completing the square, that's more in the middle. So as I said, the main thing at the moment is that completing the square bit, and then the solving it comes with practice. Okay? So as I said, you're all doing amazingly well if you're now doing the completing the square bit confidently and saying, yeah, I know what it should be. Okay? You could do that, yeah, if you wanted to. Nice boy, same thing, right? If you wrote instead x equals plus or minus root 6 minus 1, also correct. Exactly the same thing. Okay? So remember, Rev, I can't remember it's square root of 6. It's not 6. I can't do minus 1 plus 6 and minus 1 minus 6 because it's not 6, it's root 6. Okay? You can use this with any quadratic equation at all, but it does get a bit trickier if there's a number in front of the x squared. And we're hoping we've got a little bit of time to look at that shortly. But let's try and do our second one here, which is back to one of our slightly more difficult ones because of this minus 3, because 3 is not an even number. So we run into that problem we had before. Okay? So I'm going to help you through this one a little bit more because it's got that problem. If you think you're good with it, you can kind of work ahead. That's fine. So I'm going to follow the same rule that we've been following. Remember, we're not changing the rule just because we don't like what we get when we follow it, right? Same rule. So I put my x in, put my minus in, and I keep it as a fraction because it's easier. Much easier to keep it as a fraction. Okay? So let's see if we can do a better job, if more of us can do a better job this time. So forget the plus 1 that was up here. What's the straight away, the immediate thing we're going to write after our bracket if I've put 3 over 2 as the number? So let's see if we can do because last time we kind of had lots of different answers. We weren't all kind of quite on the same page. Can we now think, remember we said, following the same rule. So what are we going to need to put after the bracket if we've put 3 over 2 inside the bracket? Okay? Follow the same. Remember, you can look back at the one we did before if you want to. That's fine. So remember, Nashi's, yeah. So x minus 1.5, remember, that is correct, but it's just harder to work out what we have to put outside the bracket. That's all. So that's why the fraction is a bit easier. Okay? Right, so now we've got a few more, right? I think we've got more on the same page this time. So we've got quite a lot now kind of coming in with minus 9 over 4. Okay? So the same thing we did before. We squared 3, we squared the 2. That gets us 9 over 4, right? And then we take that away. Then we remember the plus 1, right? Then we do the plus 1 right at the end. Last thing, right? Remember, oh yeah, there was a plus 1. I'll just stick the plus 1 on the end and I'll be good. Okay? Just call me O. All right, that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, O is helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we can put that together. Yeah, so now we've got a few. So remember, now we simplify this minus 9 over 4 and plus 1. So our completed square, the kind of final first bit we're doing, x minus 3 over 2 squared minus 9 over 4 plus 1. So again, that's fractions. Okay, so that's whether you prefer to do it on a calculator, then that would be fine. Or if you would prefer to do it by hand, if you're good with fractions. So I think we're just getting a little bit of lag at the moment. Apologies. It's showing that I have a good connection. So hopefully I'm going to reappear in a second. All my connection still looks good. I think we're back. Apologies about that. Okay. I don't know if it's a YouTube thing. All right. So minus 9 over 4 plus 1, that's the bit we're fixing. So that ends up being minus 5 over 4. Okay, that's what we'd end up with then as our final completed square. So then if we were going to go on and do our next bit, we'd have the equals 0. So we'd put the equals 0. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Actually, it was lagging a bit. So as I said, my connection says it's fine. So I'm not sure what the what's causing the lagging, but there we go. So now if I put the equals 0 on, let's put it on the other end actually. Let's make that a bit clearer. So we'll stick it on there. So minus 5 over 4, that's our fraction. So if you do minus 9 over 4 plus 1, that's like plus 4 over 4, isn't it? So minus 5 over 4. Forget my common denominator. Okay, as I said, that's a fraction thing. So if you wanted to do that on a calculator, you could, but otherwise you can then remember or practice or do a bit of revision of fractions to help. Okay, so let's finish off this one. So x minus 3 over 2 squared minus 5 over 4, and then we put our equals 0 on. So it's the same steps we've done a couple of times now, right? So we go through one step at a time. We don't try and jump to an answer. We go through one step at a time, and we see what we get. Okay, so if I put, first of all, I've got my x minus 3 over 2 squared. So I need to take that 5 over 4 and move it across to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to put that, yeah, so 0 plus 5 over 4. Excellent stuff, Michael. You've included the 0 as part of your working. Good stuff. O's got it as well. Nice. So I put my 5 over 4. Now I'm going to do my square root. So I square root 5 over 4. So I'm just going to put a massive square root sign over all of it, like that. Right, nice and simple. So I just say I'm square rooting the whole fraction, not just a bit of it. I just square root the whole thing. And then remember, I need my plus or minus, because I've got two options when I square root it. And then my final step, the last little bit I would need to do, is to then move this 3 over 2 across to make it 3 over 2 plus or minus, and then put my big square root 5 over 4. At the moment, that's at kind of the very difficult end of what we've looked at so far, right? Because we've got fractions, we've got surds, right? Square roots that you can't work out. I can't work out square root of 5 over 4. It's not a nice number. So this is at the difficult end of what we've done so far, right? But remember, our main thing, our main takeaway at this point is that completing the square in the first step, okay? So the 5 over 4, Martha, yeah, I know you've kind of done it a couple of times. So that's the minus 9 over 4 that we had plus 1. Okay, so minus 9 over 4 plus 1. If you simplify that, would be minus 5 over 4. So that's where it's come from. Okay. If you've noticed so far, Chris, yeah, it has always been 1. You're absolutely right. Okay. So if you can now do a completing square where you end up with fractions, then again, you're doing a really good job so far, right? That's a good thing to pick up in this kind of short space of time that we've had so far. So you would, nice boys, good question actually. So if you left it like that, that is generally accepted. But obviously, if you would prefer for your own thing to kind of write out your two answers and say, yeah, I'm going to write them separately and say plus root 5 over 4 or minus root 5 over 4, then you could write both and say or. Okay, but it is generally accepted. If you wrote plus or minus, that's a kind of common mathematical notation. So that's okay. So it's not specific to a paper. It's just, it could be on non-calculator, it could be on calculator, it could be on either. It depends how they kind of phrase the question or what they expect you to do with it. Okay. This sort of thing where you're solving tends to be on non-calculator because obviously the idea is you shouldn't need a calculator because you can just write the square root signs and stuff and do the fractions and everything. All right. So you will notice, okay, that after that, kind of the next couple of examples are then ones where we change the thing that Krish mentioned, where we then have a number in front of the x squared. Now, normally we would obviously kind of finish off that and kind of have a go through, but I just want to kind of explain to you because we've only got 5 minutes left. I just want to give you a chance to either ask some questions about kind of how MyHeadspace works or the course, but I'm just going to talk you through a few things. So this is something normally we would then obviously have time to go on and finish, right, where we have the number in front of the x squared. But I'm just going to kind of talk you through just so you know.